Hello, my name is John Schneider. When I was a kid, I used to visit my Grandma Vi in the Jersey Bayshore area, and I'd take 8mm movies of my family and their friends. In fact, I was the family filmmaker. Today I live here, but traded my film camera for video, and recently shot this tugboat in the Shrewsbury River. Welcome to Jersey Bayshore country. Where is the Jersey Bayshore? Let's get oriented by starting with the big picture. It's somewhere in here, part of the universe, and definitely part of our world. But it's like no place I've ever experienced. And as soon as we land, I'll show you around. Well, hello everybody. Last week was part one of Jersey Bayshore Country, in which we explored the twin lights of Navesink. We met with Mark Stewart, who is in charge of collections here at the museum, which is located on the grounds of this great place. And we didn't have enough time to complete the show, so we thought to ourselves, let's do two parts, and this is it, part two. Welcome back, Mark, and thanks so much for carrying on. Let's talk a little bit more about the twin lights, shall we?
That's great. One of the unique things about the American flag is that you can look at a flag at any point in history, and by counting the stars, figure out exactly where you were in time. So every flag does, in essence, tell a story. So we brought in a lot of historic flags, some going back to the early 1800s. We have a flag that was sewn by Betsy Ross's granddaughter.
Is that
all
right?
sorts of interesting artifacts.
What is, in your estimation, what is the most, or one of the most significant flags on display in the museum currently?
We have a flag that was carried by the Buffalo Soldiers. These were African-American soldiers. That unit actually existed for many, many decades, but they're most known for their cavalry action out in the West in the wars against the Indians. And the flag we are showing right now is more or less identical to one Custer would have taken into battle,
Wow.
minus a few bullet and arrow holes,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah, sure.
That's a really valuable, and it's a flag that I've seen people come and they get a little emotional about that. We also have flags that are related to the assassination of Lincoln. We have flags from World War I and World War II that have been personalized in some way, and we've seen some veterans, not from World War I, but from World War II, come in and really attach themselves. We also have some amazing artwork. We have a painting of Ground Zero by Jamie Wyeth, which the owner of that painting, who we know paid high in the six figures for, is very generous to lend that to us.
Wow.
We also have a painting here called Our Banner in the Sky, which during the Civil War and the years after might have been the most famous, symbolic painting of that era. We have people who are coming here who don't really care about flags, who just want to see these two paintings. So this is the kind of thing this is the bang for the buck you get, and there's no buck involved because it's free. And it helps really people to understand the role the flag has played in this country, which maybe not be more significant, but certainly different than it has in any other country. People who own these historic flags and these patriotic artifacts, who often are a little bit squeamish about lending them out, they were falling over themselves to get them in here. I mean, if you own a great historic flag, even if it's a $50,000 or $100,000 flag, and we do have some of those, either you're keeping it under lock and key, or you want to put it in the place where the Pledge of Allegiance was given for the first time. It's a great opportunity, and those people are also coming to give lectures and things like that. They're all in.
And to come to the museum, is it free? Can you get in and go to the top of the tower for free?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that people are so generous with donations and purchases at the museum stores, they get here and they can't believe it's free. The tower itself is one of the great attractions in New Jersey. It's like its own little amusement park. The views are incredible. The grounds here, people are running around. We have a great old cannon that it's probably the most photographed cannon in New Jersey.
Yeah, the mystery cannon.
The mystery cannon, but
Sure.
we solved that mystery, by the way.
Oh, how? What's
Yes.
it, well, tell us the mystery and what was the solution.
Well, we have pictures of people posing on and playing around that cannon, and there are markings on there that gave clues to perhaps where it came from and
Spanish?
how old it
Was
was.
it Spanish?
There was the name Lopez on there.
Oh, that's why I thought it was Spanish.
A lot of people did think it was Spanish. However, we had a lighthouse keeper here
Yeah.
in the 1800s named Lopez,
Ah.
too. So some people suspected that he etched his initials in there.
Okay.
So it's been a mystery cannon because no one was quite sure what it was. We did a little bit of research a few years ago and figured out that it came off of a merchant ship called the Snow Joseph out of New England. It was owned by a Lopez family. It's just,
Oh, really?
Just an odd coincidence.
Yeah.
It was a clue that took a lot of people in the wrong direction. We found out that the ship went down just out here, and so we now know. There's a date on the cannon as well that was etched in by hand,
Okay.
and that corresponds to the birth date of one of the sons.
Yeah. Now, speaking of mystery, in World War II, I guess it was, there was a mystery ray that was unveiled here that was discovered. The military was doing experiments up here, weren't they, on a mystery ray?
Right, it was a mystery ray. This was actually 1935.
Yeah.
And we have a headline, which I'll show you, a newspaper article. It says, "Mystery ray experimented with at Highlands," or something like
sure,
that.
sure.
So not much of a mystery. It was radar.
Yeah.
It was the first radar which was developed over in Fort Monmouth, and they brought it here for obvious reasons because of the elevation to test it to see if it could follow airplanes and ships and things like that.
Sure.
What's interesting is when we did research on that, we found that on the exact same day, the Germans introduced their version of the mystery ray.
Oh, I smell espionage.
Well, at the same time, if you go and look at old issues of Popular Mechanics,
Really?
they made a big deal out of it. It was a big celebration. It's like, hey, everyone's on board with the mystery ray. So
Well, there's a house on the cliffs. I'll say the cliffs of Atlantic Highlands that used to be owned by AT&T Bell Laboratories, and it was also conducting experiments in radar. And there were towers there, and you can still see the pedestals. I'll show it to you right now. But they did it in conjunction with the tower that was here as well. Now, Marconi was here. I forget his first name, do you? Guillermo Marconi.
Better do that one again.
What is it?
Guillermo.
You see, I don't edit everything. Some things I edit, some things I don't. If it makes me look stupid, I'll edit it. No, I'm just kidding. So tell us about Marconi. Marconi, I don't know, did he invent wireless or telegraphy, or what did he?
He was the leading developer of wireless technology.
Okay.
And so now we're in the late 1890s. He's already shown his magic box to people. He's shown you can send messages through the air. So the big question at this point was, all right, that's great. How do you make money off of that?
Yeah.
This is a time when industry was and profit and investing was very, very big. So really, Marconi had to show that there was a commercial application for wireless communication.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew that in 1899, that September, they were running the America's Cup races off the coast here. And at the time, the America's Cup yacht races were probably the most popular sporting event in the United States. And people used to come here to watch them.
America's Cup was right out here.
Marconi knew this, and he realized that there was a great hunger for updates on the race and who won the race. And the plan was to go out on a little boat where they were racing and report the results of the race through the air to the Twin Lights, and then hardwired through the ground to the New York Herald, which bankrolled the whole experiment.
Wow.
And the idea was the New York Herald could have the paper boys go out, the newsies go out, and say, latest on the America's Cup.
Wow.
So he came here to do that, to show that there was an application for wireless communication. To us, it's a no-brainer. Back then, people really questioned, well, how do you make money off of this? But here's the interesting thing. He came here and set this whole thing up. It was at the end of the Spanish-American War, and Admiral Dewey was returning from the Philippines, where he'd won a great victory. And New York was getting ready for his return, parades, the whole, you can imagine back then. He was the number one hero in America at that point. Well, he came back a day early. His white fleet made very good time, and it was coming into New York Harbor a day early. Now you can imagine the chaos after they've set up the entire city to do this, and he shows up a day early. And Marconi saw him and radioed back and was able to alert New York that Dewey was here early, and they were able to greet him correctly and get all the parades moved up a day.
Wow.
And that, more than anything, proved the commercial value of wireless technology. And then shortly after that, they ran the America's Cup races. In fact, the America's Cup races were postponed because Dewey had arrived. So his transmission of the America's Cup race was actually the second time he proved wireless technology. And technically, by the way, that makes the twin lights, because he did leave a radio array up here, and eventually that was turned over to the Navy. And that Navy cottage is on the site too. We've stabilized it but haven't developed it yet.
There are some cement platforms. Are they remnants of the Marconi stuff?
I think those were meant to hold the wires that steadied the radar arrays that were up.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
But where those concrete hooks are, that is where the radio cottage was originally. They moved it down the hill when they did the radar experiments. Technically, this is the site of the first commercial radio station in the United States.
Amazing.
I think technically 1907 I
Sure.
think is the date.
Wow.
It wasn't playing music or anything like that.
Yeah, of course.
But they were making radio broadcasts and and charging for it.
Wow. And what is that little building down here on the, was that a post office, or there was something down there? What is that?
Well, it looks like a small, insignificant structure. It was actually part of what we call the Navy Wireless Cottage. And after Marconi established this as a radio outpost, the Navy was interested in it, and they took it over. And right now you just see a part of the original structure, which is fairly modest, but there was a wrought iron tower that rose 30 or 40 feet from there. You can see it in old postcards and things. So they would visually look out over the ocean and see all the traffic coming in. Out here right now is pretty serene out in the water. It looked like a highway, 100 years ago.
Oh, sure.
So it was important to keep track of who was going where and who was who. And they were able to gather that information visually and later electronically, but radio that to the necessary people in New York.
Was there also a life-saving station up here at all? Because I know there's some life-saving equipment in the generator room, but
one of the national treasures we have up here, which is maybe our next goal in terms of interpreting our history up here, is an unassuming little building that happens to be physically the very first life-saving station in the United States.
Wow.
Very few people know it's here. It was out on Sandy Hook when they established the U.S. Life-Saving Service in the 1840s. They built every few miles a life-saving station, which initially just housed equipment, and if there was a shipwreck, the life-saving people would run in there and get what they needed to try and rescue the people off the ship, usually when they ran aground on the sandbars out there. The fact that it still exists is just a remarkable thing. I mean, just think about Hurricane Sandy. Nothing exists on Sandy Hook.
So what year are we talking about?
1840s. It was something that was out on Sandy Hook. It was moved around a little while. They moved it to Highlands briefly, but no one really wanted this thing. So we took it up here, and I say we, this is probably 50 or 60 years ago, just to keep it safe. And it was like a time capsule of life-saving equipment.
Wow.
There was unbelievable stuff in there, including a couple of Francis Life cars. One is a prototype, and one is, one of the originals. These are the things where they would ferry passengers back from ships that had run aground. They'd shoot a big wire with a breeches.
It was like a big giant rocket ship, wasn't it? Self-contained. Is that the thing that's out in the power station?
Yeah,
museum?
we have one here, and we have another one that we lend out to other museums. And if you were on a ship that that ran aground, it's not like you just got stuck in the mud in a car. If your ship ran aground on a sandbar, every time there was a wave, it would go up, boom, and it would come down. So if you were a passenger on that ship, it must have been a terrifying experience. Whether you could swim or not made very little difference, because you were in a storm, and it was just hammering you up and down and up and down. And starting in the 1850s, they would come to the life-saving crews would come to the water's edge, and shoot a line that the people on the ship would wrap around a mast, and then they would take this life car back and forth, 7, 8, 9 people at a time.
Wow.
And what's interesting is here's a technology that someone came up with, and usually when you have a life-saving technology and you try it out for the first time, something horrible happens. In this case, the first time they used it, which is really amazing, the only person who died was someone who didn't want to wait for the next lifeguard because his family was inside, and he said, you know what? I'll go on top and I'll just hang on.
Sure.
He was the only person who died. Everyone else made it off the ship.
My gosh.
So it was one of those few contraptions back in the 19th century that worked exactly as planned the first time.
And the other, besides all of the history here at the Twin Lights, there is a magnificent view of not only Staten Island, New York City, Long Island, and all of most of Seabright and the Atlantic Ocean and the Shrewsbury River and all the bays and everything. It's marvelous, isn't it? I mean, on a clear day, you can see forever.
Well, you know, what's interesting is we all look at the weather broadcasts on TV, and we're used to seeing New Jersey, you know, from the top down. And really, when you get out here, it lends some texture and some context to that map that we're used to seeing. You really see what the land looks like and how it's formed and its relationship to the water. And I think that's one of the things people really comment here a lot is, hey, you know, you think of this as it's very recognizable from a map that we see every day on the news, but to see it in action, so to speak, is
and it's interesting too, Mark, that you when you bring people here for the first time and you show them everything that's in this area, and you start with this and everything else that's around here, people generally say something like, I had no idea. I had no idea New York was right there. I had no idea Sandy Hook was there. There's so much history here. And there's so much to see. You've got Mount Mitchell, just, you know, a stone's throw away. Why, and this may be an obvious question, but why was the site for the Twin Lights here? Why wasn't it moved out more toward Mount Mitchell, more toward the bay? Why was it more over here in this end? Do you have any idea?
This piece of land here, besides being very prominent and having a panoramic view, which was important from a life-saving standpoint, there has always been occupation, habitation on this point of land. So there was always, going back to the Hartshorn family.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There was always homes and activity
and
here.
Roads.
and roads, yes. And it's still hard to get up here if you're walking or have a bike, and even with a car, it's a little bit challenging. You can really see that as much as has changed in the world around us, and as much as we've updated things here, there are some things that just they stay the same.
Hey, has there ever been an archaeological dig at this site that you're aware of?
We have found things during renovations. The towers that I mentioned that were here in 1828, the old stone towers, which were not connected. One of them is very easy to see, its foundations just to the right of us right now, especially in the fall when the grass turns color. You can see exactly where it was. I would be very interested to do a archaeological dig around there, because I think there's probably some really interesting artifacts. But we have unearthed quite a bit of material. We've interpreted it in a showcase, which is in the auditorium, the south end of the lighthouse. That's not usually open to the public, usually on Sunday afternoons. But people really love seeing the pipes these guys used to smoke, the clothespins they used. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And with the views and the history, have there been weddings or ceremonies up here that people can come up and get married or have a picnic or a party or anything like that?
Well, it's a New Jersey park, so all those rules apply.
Oh, I see.
There's a limited space in the parking lot, but people do have brief ceremonies up here. There's no alcohol allowed up here, and anyone who wants to do anything of that nature really has to call in advance and make sure it's going to be okay. You don't want 5 wedding buses pulling up here at the same time.
Sure.
We recently held a ceremony in the top of the South Tower in the glass enclosure.
What kind of ceremony?
It was a wedding ceremony.
Oh,
very
nice.
small.
Yeah,
we're limited by size here.
Yeah. And can people come up here and picnic? I think I saw picnic tables. Maybe I was imagining.
Yes, there's picnics. It's a place where people come up for an hour. If you've got little kids, it's a great place to come just to run them, into the ground a little bit. Send them a couple of times around the lighthouse, up the tower. I know when we moved here, I had two small girls, and when they were getting, on my last nerve, I would say, let's go to the lighthouse, and I'd run them up and down the steps, and they were good to go after that. So,
Has anything about your time here, how long have you been associated with the lighthouse?
about 7 or 8 years.
7 or 8 years. What surprises you most? What was the sort of the wow factor for you? What is the thing about this that you just sort of find amazing?
I think that I'm involved with the museum collection up here. And like any museum, 95% of the stuff that we have, the public doesn't see.
Yeah.
And that's true of the Museum of Natural History, it's true of the Smithsonian, and anyone who loves museums, they understand that. And there's an intriguing aspect to that. When you go to the museum, as much as you see, you always wonder what's behind closed doors. And often it's stuff that is as good or better than the stuff on display. It just didn't somehow fit into the context of the current exhibit. So one of the first things that I did up here was to get involved with the collections and and it was kept magnificently well. I mean, I have to say, from a paperwork and an organization standpoint, it was great. And I just discovered a lot of history. They're discovering new dinosaurs right now. And they're coming out of plaster that was shipped to museums in the 1890s.
Wow.
This is where a lot of the archaeological finds are happening, just in the storerooms of museums. And you hear about that and think, gosh, why didn't they know it was there? Well, that's the nature of a museum storage. The intake is done, and then very often nothing else is done beyond that. So one of the first things I did when I got up here was to get involved with the collection and start digging around, and that's when we discovered really the connection to the Pledge of Allegiance and a lot of other interesting things. So that's been the thing that's most surprising to me. And every time I go in there, I'll come up with some other nuance to the story of this place or some other historical fact I didn't know existed. And that's a lot of fun.
Do you know what the state dinosaur is for New Jersey?
I think it's a hadrosaurus.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people know that. You're also involved with the Historical Society of Highlands, and I have been too. And there is, you were very helpful to the society in terms of creating some space up here for a museum about Highlands. Talk to us about that.
Well, whenever I move to a new place, I always found that the first thing you do is you join the Historical Society, because then you not only get the history, but the culture and the context and things like that. And I think the Historical Society of Highlands has been one of the best groups I've ever been involved with. They're very low-key. They're very focused on their traditions and the families of this town, which are great stories. One thing led to another, and we were able to open up this space where we're sitting right now in the south end of the lighthouse for a museum exhibit on Highlands history. And the society jumped right in. They gathered up a lot of great stuff, and they put together these exhibits. We just opened the space up to them here. I should say them, me too. I have a foot in both camps. But they've done a magnificent job interpreting the history of Highlands up here. And people who come to the lighthouse on Sunday afternoons when it's open have as much fun here as they do in any other part, even if they're not from Highlands.
There aren't a lot of videos and photographs. I mean, you've got some, but it's not a plethora of photographs. If somebody out there, whether they're in Minnesota or California, if somebody has old home movies or photographs of their time here, I'm sure Mark would encourage you to send it in or make copies and let us know about it.
Yeah, go to our Facebook page and make contact. We have about 1 or 2 of those conversations every month, and some of them have turned into really extraordinary donations to the museum, and we're very good at again interpreting that history and putting it out there for people to see. We have a very robust Facebook following, and people are surprisingly generous with their home photos. Movies are an issue because this is this great big iconic structure, as you said before. You don't really put the camera on that much. You generally put, especially in the old days, you would put your camera on people, family members, and the Twin Lights just happen to be in the background. We love to see those things, but they're not out there as much as you would think. There have been some historic paintings done of this place. When I first joined the society, I saw these prints everywhere in antique stores, and people had them in their homes of the Twin Lights from a book called Picturesque America, which was a very popular book in the 1870s. It was the kind of thing you'd give as a Christmas gift, and the family would have for years and years. And of course, people tear out that page, they put it in a frame, and you saw it everywhere. So knowing a little bit about the art world, I knew that print had to have been made from an original painting. They had, and we knew the artist, and he had been hired by this publisher to do a number of paintings from around here, watercolors, and then he would give the watercolors over to the engravers, and they would use those to make the plates for the prints. So I knew theoretically that there had to be a painting out there. So one of the things I wanted to do was launch a search to see where that painting was, and I figured it would take years and years, and we'd have to spend a lot of money to find it and then track it down. And it's just one of those funny things. Just when we decided to launch that effort, someone called and they said, "Hey, I've been living around here for a couple of decades. I'm moving, and I have this old watercolor, and it really belongs here. So would you like to buy it from me?"
Wow.
And I realized what it was. It was that original watercolor. So here I was ready to spend years and years and years
my
on the
gosh.
holy grail of our Mona Lisa,
Yeah,
really.
sure.
And it just fell into our lap. So we had that on display for about a year, and people were very excited to come up here. And it's out of the museum right now, but it's going to be going back next year.
I hope that you will come here and visit. It is a marvelous place. Thank you so much for hosting us here today and showing us around. And, as I've said before, this is such a wonderful place to come, to visit, to live, to work, to play. And one of the first places you have to come are the Twin Lights of Navesink, or Navesink, as some people say. I think you'll really enjoy it. As always, please come back and visit us again on Jersey Bayshore Country. And if you see me out there, whether I'm in a boat or flying a drone or walking along with a camera in my hand, please do tap me on the shoulder and say hello, introduce yourself, because nothing is more important than meeting you. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. This summer, create your own adventure at the New Jersey Bayshore, where the sun always rises and sets on the water. Enjoy more than 30 miles of sandy beaches, at the ocean, along the rivers, or on the Raritan Bay. Almost every water sport can be found at the Bayshore, from boating to fishing to swimming to beachcombing. Whether you drive, take the train, or hop aboard a convenient ferry from New York City, the Jersey Bayshore is right in your own backyard. Enjoy the scenery, history, and local attractions, such as Sandy Hook, the historic Twin Lights, or hike through the hills of Highlands. But don't forget to try one of our waterfront dining experiences before you leave. Your adventure is waiting to be discovered at the Jersey Bayshore. Visit us at jerseybayshore.com.